To what if everybody lost the First World War? Last episode, the Russians invaded Eastern Europe up against the Germans and with their communist allies in France. Speaking of the French, they are barely kicking. Paris is on the verge of falling, but the government has already moved to Bordeaux, or, 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 but is planning to once again move to Toulouse as it's more inland and less easily naval invaded by the British. So yeah, the government will finally moves to Toulouse, where the commune basically establishes its base of operations from. While Russia has to fight these guerrillas, the so the Axis, I guess, would strike back. As we remember, there were originally three factions, with those being the Intermarium, the relatively pro-Entente faction, the Axis, which was basically against everyone, and the Communists, which were also against everyone. But the Communists became the main threat over time. So in the south, we see Ukraine developing a massive guerrilla insurgency in Crimea, but the Soviets are just able to isolate it.
Ama şenep Nera abaderidera.
So the Russians are able to stabilize Lithuania, and those naval bases speaking of, they are starving, and this would be a humiliation for the Soviets. This would also lead to this area becoming reconquered. So yes. The small Lithuanian and is trying to fight back, but it fails. Failure to achieve such means. And some beans, technically. I don't think Lithuania has a massive bean culture. But we see the French moving into Alsace, but this Alsace offensive is quickly stalled as the French can only rely on minor offensives, not major ones. So yeah, we see the fall of the French commune. I mean, Paris being captured is no big deal for the French. I mean, they still have the South Mediterranean areas, and they already propped up many governments just in case, such as the Italian Socialist Republic, and have started to form puppet governments in Iberia. So in case they collapse, there will be still communists here. So yeah, we're gonna see this happen. The US stays in the middle though, as the French might attack some import vessels, but yeah, the US will probably not intervene. For now at least. I mean, there will still be very big communist sympathies, as the Axis would be incredibly weakened and the only real successful model was the hyper-nationalistic agrarian countries in the East, which only didn't suffer from the Great Depression because they were already suffering, and the communists, which, speaking of them, the fall of Baudelaire doesn't really mean much, even though the French dream has failed. That doesn't mean that many massive propaganda pamphlets have been rediscovered throughout Italy in those areas. But like after the collapse of the French, finally these governments would decide to form a military of their own. Using some pro-communist militias, these puppet states would exert control, with some deciding to do things that most communists wouldn't really like, compromise. But in reality, this would be the better period, as if they still stayed together, they wouldn't have any time to mobilize their armies and actually have a chance of survival. So yes, the Italians had to compromise on giving up Rome for the papacy. So yes, Italy still has two governments. Technically three if we count the papacy, but or even four for San Marino and five for Monaco if we count these two. Speaking of Vatican City, it actually expands to all of Rome, becoming the small city, this not really much of a state country. And of course, who can't forget about those juicy Sardinian and annexations of Corsica? So the Sardines basically build up what was historically, I think, Pontes or whatever his name was, Pompey's whatever his name. I don't care. Like that the guy who blockaded Rome from North African imports through this area. That's basically it. So, so this guy disrupts trade along the colonies, which was incredibly low, and this would be a very minor blow to the new Italian government, which due to its compromise would have not a lot of legitimacy, but with its autonomy, it and especially the Iberian countries, they would have relatively more legitimacy. Oh, but the real one who has lots of legitimacy is the Spanish. So the communists would actually not be split into pieces as they were not as extremely diehard. But yes, still some with probably let's say some Croatia, some that have Croatia, Slovenia, Croatian, so Croatia, Silky or whatever its name was, basically this area, the Slovenia, Croatia, and Italian Dalmatia become three buffer states between to become basically pro-communist buffer states. Romania would be saved as the French did plan on invading Romania for ties to the Soviets, with the Western European communist bloc being more pragmatic, more like the ideology is more similar to post-Stalin, but they wouldn't be very rich, so they wouldn't have this period of peacetime when some would call prosperity. And those people I like to, and I can name one of them. It's my sister's babysitter. So, well, speaking of France, what would happen? They lost two wars, two times, by the way. So, what the hell are they gonna do? the answer's incredibly simple. They're still gonna survive, actually, as the Italians don't take cover heavily. And the Germans don't really want anything. Maybe some Breton independence, but not really anything, as the French have been harmed. Maybe some more operation, nothing big. And probably like an occupation of the country. So the Brits would be forced to ally with the Germans. They hate the Germans, by the way. They really don't like the Germans. But they need to be allies with them. Speaking of the Crimean insurgents, they would actually be able to form a stable government and basically become what? Georgia, Armenia, the Don Cossacks, and a bunch of separatist movements. Georgia was basically independent. Same with the Transcaucasian Commissariat. This country is more comparable to the historic Crimean People's Republic or the Transcaucasian Commissariat. Go look at that. Those two are real things. I don't know if it was called the People's Republic, but I think it was. So the Estonian guerrillas would be able to liberate their country and move to Latvia. Latvia would also be liberated, and the Soviets would actually do the same thing as the communist puppet states would do. Compromise. Stalin would definitely know what he was getting to. Trotsky was the main leader, but Stalin would basically try to ask, demand some areas in negotiations. Firstly, this treaty would be of basically a long time, century or maybe even more. Maybe even eternal, but I don't think so. As he thinks that he must solidify the Russian, Georgian, whatever this area is, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Central Asia basically. This weird Turkestan, this one village over here. And of course, he doesn't like the Japanese. And with no communist Mongolia, the Mongols are under a militaristic Buddhist theocracy. I think that's kind of funny, okay? The Buddhist, they're militarist, and they're theocratic. But Mongolian this timeline makes no fucking sense. No sense. This shit don't make sense. But yeah, let's stop with the yapping and move to other things. It's officially the 2nd of January 2026. Happy New Year, by the way. I forgot to say that several minutes ago. And with this, we could officially end this and not rule the Second World War. This would be, of course, an incredible change, as this would promote ideological cooperation for global peace, and would most likely be a catalyst for something like, and probably even a Second World War. Communists would still establish a large base in Asia, if that's maybe spoilers. But I think I should call this probably and finally for, let's just say, season 1. Call it season 1 and here. This will be the end of this. Maybe I'll make a true finale with maybe in Second World War, or even a minor Cold War explanation video, or that trailer, which I can't do because I know how Premiere, yada yada yada, about the equipment. So with this, and basically the majority of season 1